Hi there, I'm Tanner from Cruzely.com, and I just got off the ship for my 7-day Alaskan cruise from Seattle. Now, it's my second trip there in the past 3 years, and if you're going, I have good news that it is just flat out amazing. But it is a little different than any other cruise that you might take, and over my time, I've picked up some of the best tips and things to know that most people never share. So here's what you'll want to know before you sail or even book your trip to Alaska. Starting off, you might see some people online fretting over one Alaskan itinerary or another when they're trying to pick their cruise. I'm here to say that if you're sailing a traditional 7-day trip, you can stop worrying. Truth is, there aren't that many different Alaskan cruise ports. It's usually some grab bag of Juneau, Sitka, Ketchikan, and Skagway, with some trips sailing to one or two others in the southeast of Alaska. The thing is that yes, there are differences in between these ports, but really they are pretty similar in that they are all the same part of the country and they have similar, though certainly not identical, scenery. I definitely have some ports that I enjoy over others in Alaska, but what's most important is just getting to see Alaska at all. When I'm booking, I don't fret too much over the stops on the list. Now, where I do take notice is if there is a trip to an arm or a fjord for scenic cruising. I'm talking spots like Dawes Glacier and the Endicott Arm. These special scenic routes are the best of the scenery that you'll visit, and it's the entire reason to visit Alaska altogether. So be sure to look for those routes with scenic cruising more than looking for specific ports. My first cruise had some of the best weather to Alaska that you can ever imagine. Rainy and windy on the way up, and then blue skies once we actually got there. It is absolutely not always like that. In fact, my last trip, it was overcast most of the time, but the rain that was predicted all week, it held off until one of the last days of the trip. Even so, I still overheard several people talking about the great luck the trip was having with this amazing weather. All of that is to say that if it's not raining, then consider it good weather in Alaska during the cruise season. Maybe you luck out and have blue skies, but prepare for clouds if not something worse. I figured that on my most recent cruise, I saved about $120 in getting back and forth from the airport to the cruise ship. In fact, I spent only $12 round trip for 2 people. The key is to use Seattle's public transportation to get to the ship if you can. The Link light rail system has a stop at the airport and the route heads straight to downtown. A one-way ride is only $3 per person. At one point, I checked Lyft and it was charging nearly $70 for the same route. All you have to do is buy a ticket, hop on board, and wait for the Westlake station in downtown Seattle. The train is clean and it's comfy, and the ride only takes about 30 minutes to get to downtown from where you'll get on at the airport. From there, you can walk to Pier 66 through the famous Pike Place Market. It's only about 10 minutes. Now, if you are sailing for Pier 91, you will want to catch a ride via Uber or Lyft to the port, but the price from downtown will be much lower than if you're going from the airport. Let's talk a bit about what you'll see and how to remember it on your Alaskan cruise. I think an underrated aspect of sailing Alaska that's not really talked about that much is the wildlife that you're going to see, even if you don't go on one of those special whale watching excursions or something similar. During my most recent cruise, bald eagles are flying everywhere. Seriously, it's almost like seeing a pigeon in Alaska. I saw otters in Sitka and Ketchikan, and multiple times whales breached within sight of the ship. But when I travel, I use my phone to take pictures and video. And it's great for most things, but anyone that's tried to take a photo with a phone at a distance knows that you wind up with a tiny dot that you can't make out despite it looking clear to the naked eye. For that reason, if you're wanting to remember the wildlife when you visit Alaska, you just have to take a legit camera with a good lens to capture the image how you actually see it. One thing that's really nice is that yes, your phone should work when you're in port in Alaska. Now, if you travel to the Caribbean, you're dealing with multiple countries and you don't always have service available unless you have an international plan with your phone. In Alaska, there's cell service available in all the ports of call that you'll visit, but just know that it's not likely to be as fast as you might be used to back home. I personally use Mint Mobile, which is on the T-Mobile network. My first trip in 2022, my phone didn't work at all, while people with the major carriers were able to use theirs. But on my most recent trip this year, 2025, my phone did work, but the speed was still pretty slow. Still, I was able to check in back home and use data. So if you're thinking about getting expensive Wi-Fi on the ship just to keep in touch back home, you can go ahead and save your money and just use your phone in port. Now, cruise lines love to brag about all the water slides and the go-karts and the roller coasters and the swimming pools that they can fit on a cruise ship. In Alaska, all those outdoor features mean practically nothing. Get good weather and you might want to sit in the sunshine and soak it in, but you're likely not going to be taking a dip in the pool, but maybe you will in a hot tub. If the weather is cool and overcast or rainy, you won't even want to sit outside on the pool deck. That's why when booking, you want to pay way more attention to the ship than you might if you were headed somewhere warmer. For one, you want to be sure that there's a lot to do indoors, especially if sailing with kids. The ideal is to sail on a ship with an indoor pool area or a solarium that will allow you to relax and feel like you're outside even while staying indoors and comfortable. Remember, outdoor spaces are a major part of a cruise ship, so if you can't go outside, you're cutting down the public space available by a big chunk. I think the general rule of thumb is that if you are sailing to Alaska, you have to get a balcony cabin. I'm personally not so sure. Now don't get me wrong, yes, a balcony is nice. It's your own private spot to look out at the scenery anytime you want. But don't be surprised if you don't use it that much. Frankly, it can be cool, especially if the ship is moving, giving you a strong breeze. It's doubtful that you're just going to sit outside and watch the scenery go by like you would in the Caribbean. Instead, I actually think that an ocean view cabin is probably the most ideal. It gives you the view for a lower price tag without worrying about the cold or the rain. Remember, there's always the pool decks if you do want to go outside and get a view of the scenery. But if you're a light sleeper, then even an interior room may be better for you. The days in Alaska, they are long. It can start getting light out around 5 a.m. and get dark around 11 p.m. Even if you draw the curtains in the room, light can still get in. But with an interior cabin, it goes pitch black until you turn on the lights. Along the lines of having to deal with long daylight hours, you should know that the time and the days can really mess with you, especially if you live on the East Coast. Let's start with those long daytime hours. As I mentioned, expect it to start getting light around 5 a.m., if not a little bit earlier, and it gets dark around 10:30 to 11 o'clock at night. And when you start to see that dimming with the evening light, you still have several hours of daylight left. I find that it completely throws off my rhythm when I'm sailing Alaska. Add on top of that, the fact that Seattle is on Pacific time, which is 3 hours behind the East Coast, but Alaska is another hour earlier. So if you normally go to bed at 10 p.m. on the East Coast, it's 6 p.m. on your cruise, and it's not getting dark for another 5 hours. Things like sleep masks or alarm clocks or other sleeping aids, they are a smart thing to bring to help you out. Another thing to know about Alaskan cruises are the port times are way different than you might be used to. My first cruise to the region was on Royal Caribbean, and the port times were slightly different, such as getting to Juneau at 1 p.m. in the afternoon and arriving in Victoria, BC at 4 p.m. My most recent Alaska cruise was with Norwegian, and that was even wilder, with arriving at 3 different ports between 6 to 6:30 a.m. In Juneau, we left at 1 p.m., and in Victoria, we were in port from 8 p.m. to midnight. This isn't so much a tip, but really just something that you should know, as it's a little strange to be off the ship before 7 a.m. to go explore a port. Few people take an Alaskan trip as their first cruise. It's far more common to sail the Caribbean first. I will tell you that it's a completely different experience in the Caribbean, not just in the scenery, of course, but the atmosphere on the ship is different, which it's much less of a party, and also you're visiting places that are cities with tourism rather than just cities built solely on tourism. But I've noticed that the cruise lines, they're starting to have an impact on the atmosphere in the ports. With more ships and more tourists, more of those kitschy souvenir shops, and even more private spots like Icy Strait Point, which aren't actual real towns, but instead it's ports built for the cruise ships. It's a bit disappointing because it means that a lot of people aren't seeing the real Alaska in all the ports, but a much more touristy version of things. Still, it is relatively easy to get outside of these spots and see a more authentic side of life if you want to. Now, if you head to Alaska, souvenirs are a must, and trust me, there's no shortage of places to buy everything from t-shirts to shot glasses and anything in between that you can imagine. But if you want a deal, then I have a couple of suggestions. First, if you are headed to Ketchikan and your ship is docking at Ward Cove, then the store there is massive. If you live in Texas like me, then it's essentially an Alaskan Buc-ee's with anything that you can think of for a souvenir, and the prices actually are among the best that I found in any port that I visited. But if you aren't stopping there, then don't worry. Instead, when you're in port, then scout out a grocery store. Any town will have one or more likely several of these spots. I found that they often have a souvenir section, and at least for basic stuff like hats and t-shirts, they are considerably cheaper than what you find in the other souvenir shops. Speaking of money, one thing that might give you sticker shock are the shore excursions. Now, I always tell people to do at least one excursion on their cruise no matter where it goes, because it gives you the chance to do and see things that you just can't experience back home. But even I have a problem swallowing some of the prices that I see. Whale watching is going to run about $300 per person, so a family of 4 is dropping more than $1,000 for just a few hours. That's more than it would cost to visit Disney for an entire day for a family. A helicopter tour up the glacier in Juneau, it's upwards of $600 or more depending on which one you choose. Even this gondola ride up the mountain is $50 per person for the 5 to 10 minute ride up. If you have the means, then no doubt you can do some amazing stuff in Alaska. Honestly, I tend to explore on my own as the towns are walkable and you see some cool stuff that most tourists don't get to see. And one final tip that you'll want to know is that free rides are available in most of the cruise ports. If you're looking at the map of a port, you likely notice that the actual cruise dock is typically located well outside of town, and sometimes it's quite a distance. The exception is Juneau and Ketchikan, but even there you'll find that there's at least 1 or 2 docks that are still a ways away. The good news is that there are buses that run continually back and forth from these docks to the town, so you can get a free ride in many cases. Now, there is an exception for Icy Strait Point, where the round-trip bus ride into Hoonah, Alaska is $10 per person. And there's another fee when you visit Victoria in Canada and you want to get a ride into downtown. No matter, just know that you don't have to fool with catching a taxi or calling an Uber or Lyft. It's super easy to get into town and back without spending a fortune. Thank you for watching. If you want more information on sailing Alaska and everything from port guides to what to pack, I have tons of more information on Cruzely.com, and I put some links in the description below. If you found this video helpful, then I hope that you'll subscribe to this channel as we have more than 108,000 subscribers. Until next time, happy sailing.